Okay, here I am inside my coach, and I'm trying to connect my phone to a Wi-Fi connection. We're out in the Walmart parking lot, and I'm trying to connect my phone to the Walmart Wi-Fi, or Starbucks, or McDonald's, or Burger King, or whatever. But my phone just doesn't see their Wi-Fi connection inside the coach here. If I go outside, maybe it gets a signal, or maybe it's a kind of a weak signal. So how do we solve that issue? We set up a kind of like a bridge. We're going to basically put together some devices that will, establish the connection to that public Wi-Fi, whether it's McDonald's or Starbucks, from outside our coach, bring the signal inside the coach, and then we have our Wi-Fi inside the coach that I will then connect my devices to. This video is about how we go about doing that. All right, so we can't do, totally geek out on technology without doing some whiteboard stuff. So I'm going to do a quick whiteboard, kind of an overview of what's going on here. So let's start from inside here with we have our TP-Link access point. That is our access point that provides connections to your devices, your phone, your computer, and tablets and whatever inside your coach. So that's inside the coach, providing a connection to your devices inside the coach. Now there's a little short patch cable running from that, an Ethernet cable, to the power over Ethernet injector brick. And so we've got 110 voltage going into that, and then that transfers it to, I think it's 48 volts is what it's sending out over power over Ethernet. And then this power over an Ethernet injector we have that power over Ethernet cable, which is going outside to the back of our coach. Here's our coach. And that's going to the Ubiquiti rocket on the back of the coach. Of course, it has the omnidirectional antenna on top of that. And then that is connecting to your public access point, which could be Starbucks or something. So out here somewhere is a public access point. Might look something like that. And so that's Wi-Fi connection coming out from that in all directions, and we're connecting to that access point. And then that access point at some point is running an Ethernet cable back to their router. And this is the public access point router. And it might have a firewall on it, and that's probably inside their office somewhere. So that could be Starbucks, could be McDonald's, Walmart, whatever. But the router is probably inside their building. It's feeding an access point. You're accessing their access point. And then from their router, it's going out to the cloud, the internet. So let's work backwards from this. From the public internet, their router is pulling a public IP address. In other words, the outside of the router is pulling a public IP address that's out on the internet. The router is translating. It's doing what's called network address translation, and it's feeding addresses out this direction and out through that wireless access point. It may be also serving devices within their office, like maybe their computers or something. Usually not a good thing if they're running any credit card stuff. Payment card industry data security standards have some pretty strict requirements as far as stuff you might do inside your office on this network. But anyway, for our uses, we don't really care. So public internet with their public IP on the public internet side of the router is doing network address translation. It's feeding IP addresses out through this Wi-Fi access point. Our Ubiquiti M2 Rocket over here is pulling an IP address from this device. So let's just say that this is sending out it sends out an IP address of 192.168.1.40. I'm just making that up, but it could be sending that IP address, and let's pretend that that's the IP address it is assigned to our rocket, M2 Rocket Titanium. Okay, the Rocket actually has its own built-in router, and we're making use of that because it's sending, while it is pulling that IP address from there, it's going to send another IP address into our internal network. So it's going to do another network address translation. And so this is a security thing for us. We're basically creating our own network here that's separate from their network and then separate from that network. And there's probably a firewall functionality in this router, and I think there's some limited firewall functionality in our Rocket as well. You may want to run a software firewall on your devices. But anyway, so this M2 Rocket has pulled this IP address, but now it's going to create its own IP addresses for all the devices in our network. Now I've set mine up to where it's going to send out 10.1.4.21 through 200 IP addresses to these devices out here. Now, so this is sending out the IP addresses on there to any device that wants it. This TP-Link access point is just being a dumb device. It's just transmitting everything from this to these devices internally. It's not doing it, running any interference. There's no network address translation going on here. We don't want that. That just causes problems. So there's no router functionality there, nothing like, no firewall, nothing. Just a dumb access point. That's what we want. That's why we have the TP-Link. And I'll have the links to the particular model number of this, as well as links to the Ubiquiti access point, and also to the power over Ethernet cable that's outside hardened. And so anyway, so my phone here is going to be pulling, say, it might pull a 10.1.4.22. My computer might be pulling a 10.1.4.23, and so on, all the way up through 200. You know, most likely you don't have that many devices, but you can. And now, so when I want to manage this device, remember, I set this device up, its public or its private site IP address to manage this device is 10.1.4.20. That's what I set mine up to be. Now, by default, I think it was 192.168.1. Maybe 10 or something, but you'll have to check the manual to see what it is by default. But so anyway, when I want to manage this device, ideally, I could connect my computer instead of connecting to the access point, just to help, eliminate, make troubleshooting easier. Take your computer and connect it direct to this power over Ethernet injector, to that outputs, or the output side on the power over Ethernet injector, where the TP-Link access point would connect on that power over Ethernet. Power over Ethernet injector. We'll connect our computer with an Ethernet cable directly to that. And so we're kind of just bypassing the access point for initial configuration. Once you got that done, then we just go through the TP-Link. But that's just to help you when you're trying to, because it initially may be a bit of a struggle to get this all to work. I mean, it's not too hard, but if you miss something, it's easier to troubleshoot if you just kind of reduce the footprint of potential problems. So connect your computer to that injector, which is feeding the Ubiquiti, and we can do the configuration there. And if you want to, you can actually, once you've got it configured, you could also stay connected and configure it to connect to this Starbucks or Wi-Fi or whatever, and actually use your computer directly connected with an Ethernet cable to the Ubiquiti device. Now the TP-Link, you add that in there when you've got it all set up, and then that way you're able to connect to that instead of connecting to this. Instead of having a physical Ethernet connection, you connect to the wireless connection of that. Now I like to set up, the TP-Link is going to be the SSID of that is what you're going to actually connect your internal devices to. So I've set mine up for ours. We've set the SSID to Raggedy Edge, and so that's my SSID. You can set yours to whatever you want it to be. If you got a YouTube channel, you could set it up to be that, or you could set it up to one of the famous ones is FBI surveillance van #1 or something like that, or virus vault. Something sounds kind of sketchy, so people don't want to try to connect to it. Now I do set up my TP-Link. I set it up with the SSID I want. You don't have to check the manual of the TP-Link to figure that all out. It will come default with something, which will be just some obscure thing, but you can set it up to have your own custom SSID, and then you can set it up to be password protected, which I do. I don't do anything really hard, and it's basically my phone number, but that way it's easy to connect to. Now, when you're connecting to Starbucks, you're connecting to this Ubiquiti device to the Starbucks or Walmart Wi-Fi. A lot of these places, some of them are going to have no security requirements, no password requirements. And actually, I think that's good. That makes things easier for them to manage. When they set it up to have encryption or security, password protected, then people just have all kinds of trouble, seems like, with that. But typically you're going to have these places, in RV parks do that often, is they do password protect it so that maybe the neighbors aren't using their data. But like, for example, the place I'm at here, we're out in the middle of nowhere, and there's really no chance that I guess somebody could pull over on the side of the highway and connect if it was set open without any encryption or any password required. Now, just because you are using a password to connect to this, that doesn't really establish any security for you out here on the public internet, so to speak. It's basically, there's a couple of types of passwords, but it could just be a simple password where it's just saying, okay, you have access to that, but there's no encryption between you and there. Now, WPA does provide a little bit of encryption. It's sort of like a little tiny mini VLAN between this device and this device. But once it's going out past here, there's no encryption beyond that. Now, really, a lot of people think that that's a problem, but really your security is going to come from your firewall, and there's going to be some firewall functionality in the Ubiquiti, but also the security of your devices themselves. And then when you use those devices to do, monetary transactions, they're going to basically use an HTTPS connection that's going to encrypt it from this device all the way through out into where it reaches your bank. So to connect to your bank, the HTTPS is going to be a secure connection, basically like a little VLAN, virtual local area network. It's basically going to secure that between you and the bank. So that's really where your security is going to come from, is not so much the password protection between you and the public access point. So just keep that in mind. Just because they required a password here does not mean you're secured necessarily there, unless you're using HTTPS, and most banks are going to require you to they're not even going to operate on a standard HTTP connection. So those are going to be encrypted connections to banks and your brokerages and whatnot. So anyway, there's my my little pathetic whiteboard of the whole thing. Hope that gives you an easy high level view of what's going on here. Okay, this is where the public Wi-Fi, in this case at this RV park, is at. We have it here, Wi-Fi access point mounted on this small tower here. And one of the tools I often will use is a Wi-Fi analyzer, so that if you have the option of making a choice on where you're going to park, you can actually drive around and then see where the signal is the strongest, and then pick out that Wi-Fi access point to connect to. Okay, this is where it all starts. This is the Ubiquiti M2 Titanium. This is what actually connects to external public Wi-Fi somewhere. And we see we've got an omnidirectional antenna on here. And if you notice, I've got the antenna set pretty much flush with the top of my ladder. Now, it used to be I had this up much higher and could get, you know, a little bit better reception, or at least didn't have to worry about the direction I parked the coach. Now, after knocking my antenna off with low-hanging branches a few times, I decided that I could put up with a little bit less than optimal performance. Keeping it down low like this just means I have to kind of make sure that the rear of my coach is facing the direction of the public Wi-Fi access point. Now, so of course, starting here, we got the omnidirectional antenna. It connects to the top of the Ubiquiti Bullet M2 titanium device. And then underneath here, you have this sealed connection where a power over Ethernet network cable can connect from here. And this is not only to provide the internet connection to inside the coach, but also to provide power to this device. So that's why it's called Power over Ethernet, PoE. And that is also an exterior grade cable, so it can withstand being out in the sun and the weather all the time. And then it of course runs down the ladder. And in my case, I have it running up into where my my electrical connections go, and up through a hole there up into our bedroom. Now, another option would be to run it to your up on your deck on top, run it to the refrigerator vent and run it down through there. I think there on the ladder this works pretty good. I've got the power over Ethernet cable zip tied to several points on the ladder, and then that goes inside the coach. Okay, this is the power over Ethernet cable that comes in from outside that connects to that Ubiquiti M2 titanium rocket, and it comes in and meets up with this this power block. That is the power over Ethernet injector. Basically, all it is doing is taking the Ethernet cable and putting some power on some of those copper wires in there. And so I've got it hooked up to a 110 connection here because we're at a RV park. I do have also the option of using a 12 volt connection as well. Now, out of this this power over Ethernet block, here's that the power over Ethernet cable coming in from outside. Out of it, I have a standard Ethernet jumper here, and that is connecting to this TP-Link Wi-Fi access point. Now, I found through painful trial and error to use a true access point and not a device that can be configured as a router or an access point. In my experience, that the devices that say they can be configured as an access point end up, for some reason, kind of becoming like a network address translation device or a router. So you want this to be just a pure access point. And that's why I've gone with this TP-Link. It is just an access point. It has no other functionality, and that way. The reason is because I'm going to connect whatever, when I go to configure that Ubiquiti that's outside, I want to pull the IP address from it and not from another device, because I want to have direct access to be able to configure that outside device, that Ubiquiti M2 rocket, because I have to, when I connect, I have to pull an IP address that I can configure that rocket and then set it up to connect to the public Wi-Fi access point out in the public. And so if I'm connecting to McDonald's or Starbucks or Walmart Wi-Fi or an RV park Wi-Fi, I've got to configure that M2 rocket to connect to it. And to have access to that rocket, I need this to be just a dumb access point. So stick with an access point. Don't try to use a router inside. Now, if you want to use a router for some reason, because the Ubiquiti M2 is functioning as a network address translation device, because it is pulling an IP address from the public, whether McDonald's, Walmart, or the RV park, and then it's it's creating its internal IP address for our devices connect to. First thing is to set up the Ubiquiti M2 Rocket. Not at this point, we're not trying to connect to a public Wi-Fi. We just got to get it set up to be a bridge. And so the first step is to log into the device. Now I suggest connecting a notebook computer direct to that, bypass the access point and connect the computer direct to the output from the Power over Ethernet injector. And then you'll type in the IP address. In my case, I've set up mine to have IP address of 10.1.4.20. Now by default, it comes from the factory with a 192.168 something address. You'll have to look that up in your manual. That's going to vary depending on how new or old your device is. Okay, so we enter in our credentials. And now we're logged in. So the first thing to configure it is to go to the Network tab. So basically you're going to want to replicate everything on this Network tab. The network mode is router. The rest of this is configuration mode is simple. Now some of this may already be set up this way. The wireless LAN settings. This is the fallback IP. This is probably the default IP for the device, 192.168.10.1. But in my case, I have mine set up for the LAN interface, which is the wired connection that goes to the TP-Link access point is 10.1.4.20. That's the address of the Ubiquiti M2 Rocket. And then it's going to supply addresses in the range of 10.1.4.21 through 10.1.4 to 200. So that's the IP addresses that the Rocket is going to supply to your devices, your phone, your computers, your tablets, or whatever. Now the key part for configuration is over here on the Advanced tab. Now one of the things that's set on the Advanced tab is to set basically the auto adjust here. It may be set that way by default now, I'm not sure. And that basically going to set this to 0, and that's for distance. It's basically doing some testing for distance, and it will automatically set the timeouts so that it doesn't fail if it's a really long distance shot. I did once connect across water almost 1.25 miles away using this. Of course your latency was a little bit up there, but it did connect. Now the other key setting is the wireless mode. You're going to set that to station, and that's basically what I call bridge. It's basically going to connect to a public address and then translate a network internally. So set that to station. Okay, so assuming you got everything set up right, in order to establish a connection to a public access point, now whether it's your RV park, McDonald's, Burger King, Walmart, whatever, public Wi-Fi, Starbucks, so we've got to connect our Ubiquiti M2 Rocket to that public connection. So first we're going to have to connect to the access point, our device, whether it's our phone, tablet, or computer. In this case, I'm using the computer, and this computer is connected to the TP-Link access point, but it is pulling the IP address from the M2 Rocket. So to log in my case, I have mine set up, as noted earlier, at 10.1.4.20. So we'll enter in our credentials. And right now, connected to something, but we're not connected to what we want to be. So I'm going to go to the wireless tab, and everything is going to be done pretty much on this wireless tab. And right now we're connected to this SSID here, but that's not what I want to connect to. I want to connect to the RV Park's Wi-Fi access point. So I'm going to click on the select button. And it's basically going to search for all the Wi-Fi access points that it can see. And as you can see, we've got a pretty decent selection of Wi-Fi access points here. I'm going to sort them by the signal to noise ratio. And so I want to sort them from the strongest signal down to the weakest. So of course I want to choose the strongest signal for the access point that for the RV park here. And I'm at the silos, so I'm going to choose this access point. And you can see this one does have encryption, WPA2. Now oftentimes if you're connecting to, say, McDonald's or Starbucks, it'll say none. Like for example, this one down here says none. And if so at Starbucks it has no encryption, basically it's not requiring you to log on to use their access point. That's a little bit easier. But Silos RV Park does require encryption. So once we've selected that, I'm going to choose Select. And then before I click Change down here, I do need to set the password, because the RV park is requiring WPA2 encryption. So I'm going to type in the password for the RV park here. And if I wanted to, I could click Show to see what I typed in, but I'm going to assume that I typed it in right and not share their access point credentials on the internet. So now I'll click Change. And then once it clicks Change, you still have to click one more time, click Apply. And basically that's going to reboot the device. So it's going to apply that change we made to the device and reboot it. So at this point, for a few minutes, I won't be able to, if I click on anything here, it's just not going to go anywhere until it finishes rebooting. Okay, once it's finished rebooting, we can click on the main tab. And from here we can, this is just to kind of, for diagnostics, we can see our signal strength, which I've got excellent signal strength here. It's all the way over in the blue. Quite often I'm operating down here in the orange or yellow if I'm having to do a pretty long shot. But this one's a pretty close access point. Some interesting things here. It does show, it can estimate the distance to the access point. It thinks it's 1/10 of a mile away. It's actually about maybe 50 feet away. But then you got down here, got some graphs to show as data starts moving over it. Now at this point you should be able to just do normal things on the internet. You can open up a new tab and go to Google. Just to check that you are in fact connected. So you're probably wondering, okay, all this equipment I need, do you have a list of everything I need? Well, there will be a list of links to all of the equipment that I use, the Ubiquiti M2 Rocket, the TP-Link, Wi-Fi access point, the Power over Ethernet cable, and the omnidirectional antenna, and some other stuff as well. They're all down in the description of the video, but you can also go check out raggedydedge.net, where I've got a list of all this stuff. So if you go to www.raggedydedge.net and then click on RV Raggedy Edge here over in the menu, and if you scroll down into RV Projects and choose that, and that will take you to quite a few projects we've worked on the motorhome here, from alternator replacements to our tire pressure monitoring system, our ladder rack, how we carry our ladder on the front of the coach to kind of act as a deer deflector, and then our reserve water tank, our device or a pump for bringing portable water to our coach, how we do that. And then when we did a caliper brake and brake job on our coach, everything we used for that, lots of cool stuff there. Some work we did on the generator, and some work we also did on our battery tray. And then finally, way down here at the bottom, RV Wi-Fi bridge. Now, I've got, we've got a selection of the devices that I've used here, and of course one is the Ubiquiti M2 Titanium. That's the key core part of the whole thing. So if you click on that, that's going to take you right to Amazon, and this is an affiliate link. So if you do click on that and purchase from Amazon, I get maybe 50 cents or $1 or something, so definitely helped me justify making this video. Okay, this is just kind of an unboxing of the Ubiquiti Bullet. I think I keep calling it Rocket, but it's actually a Bullet. They do have, I think, another device is called a Rocket. I used to work with Ubiquiti a lot on a lot of different projects, but this is the M2 high power, the titanium version. It's a pretty old, I mean, it's probably been some improvements since I got this one, but here's what you get inside the box. This is your power over Ethernet injector, and that's the side that's labeled PoE. That's what will connect. You'll run the cable, Ethernet cable, from that to the Bullet that runs up in there. And then the LAN side is what would go to the TP-Link access point, or any access point you use, but just make sure it's a dumb access point. I want to emphasize that. Now the top of the Bullet, M2 Bullet, uses a Type N antenna connector, so you can use any Type N connector or antenna on it, I think, and that will you could use even a directional one if you wanted to. I use an omnidirectional. It's just simpler and makes it a little more versatile. I don't have to worry about pointing the coach in the right direction. But you see, this is a nice, really nice anodized aluminum body. Seems to hold up under the weather really well. On this end, you've got the like a packing gland that opens up like that. And this packing gland, I was thinking it was split, but I guess you might have to split it. If not, it looks like there's a maybe. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's split. So you can get the cable in there, and then as that crimps down, that seals it against the weather. And then, as you can see, maybe up in there, let me add a little bit of light to this. We have basically an Ethernet connection under there, and when you're testing, when you actually plug it in, you'll actually be able to see some lights and stuff come on inside there. And then, of course, you've got there's another version of the Ubiquiti. It's a plastic version. It's a little bit more affordable, but not quite as durable for outside use. But you know, you can save some bucks and go that route if you like. The omnidirectional antenna, and then the TP-Link AC 1750 wireless access point, which is really the key to making this thing as easy as possible, is using just a dumb access point, not something that can be configured as an access point or as a router. So stick with just a dumb access point, and this is a really good one. It's worked really well for us. There are other alternatives, and Techno RV has a Wi-Fi kit that's kind of similar to what we've got here. In fact, it looks to me like it's using a Ubiquiti device, so you could buy the whole package there. And I am affiliate with Techno RV, so again, I'm going to get a little bit of a kickback. So if you're trying to avoid that, you can sneak out of my website and go direct to them and make sure I don't get any money out of this. We do have some other projects listed here. There's some more information on the reserve water tank we added, and then doing some work on the water heater where we did the vinegar flush and replaced the anode. And then here we got some stuff where we did some upholstery work. So anyway, check out raggededge.net and get the complete parts list that you need to create this setup. Thanks for watching.